Welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and on this stream, we work on Django applications and work through some Python code exercises and examples. We're going to continue on that path this evening. I've got a project that I've been working on over the last couple of sessions, and we're going to continue on that project. But first, before we get to that, we're going to go to a Python exercise. We've been using exercism.org, which you can see on the screen here, and we're going to continue on one of the last exercises in the Python syllabus before we can branch out and do a bunch of other exercises that are available to us. So let's jump to the bottom here and get into it. This one is going to be on classes. So let's look at this and figure out what exercise we've got ahead of us. It looks like Ellen's Alien Game is the name of the exercise we're going to be taking care of today. The way this works is we download the exercise, do the code, and do what's listed here. There's some tests that come along with it that we can check our code to see how it works. And then once we're done, we can submit our solution and compare it to other solutions that are out there. So let's bring up a terminal and get back over to where I had the Exercism stuff. And let's download Ellen's Alien Game. All right, we had this solution from a previous week. So let's get that out of there. And I'm going to take this file, this pytest.ini file, and copy some stuff out of there because we're going to want it. So we need to go to Ellen's Alien Game, first create a pytest.ini file, and paste in this little bit of configuration. It basically will mute a bunch of warnings that were coming out of PyTest when running this. Also, if anybody's joining in, ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's what this is about. So you're free to do that. And if you like what you see, you can comment, like, subscribe, all of those good things on YouTube. That helps out. So I appreciate that. All right, let's bring up our code. So we've got, a class, an alien class. And I'm also going to bring up the test file that goes with this. And so we'll have them side by side. Wow, there's some stuff there. So alien, or I guess it's not really called alien, it's called classes. So we've got our implementation file. Hey John, welcome. We've got our implementation file here on the left side and a set of tests on the right. The reason I have this up is so that I can run individual tests at once. It's clearly having some problems though, so we will see how this goes. I don't know what it is importing. Oh, we're probably missing a function. So let's go look at the problem definition and see what's going on, see what we're missing, and then try and get our test running. Okay, Ellen's Alien Game. Ellen is making a game where the player has to fight aliens. She has just learned about object-oriented programming, OOP, and is eager to take advantage of what using classes could offer her program. To Ellen's delight, you have offered to help, and she has given you the task of programming the aliens that the player has to fight. Okay, that sounds kind of fun. So first thing, define an alien class with a constructor that accepts two parameters, an x coordinate and a y coordinate, putting them into x coordinate and y coordinate instance variables. Every alien will start off with a health level of 0, so the health variable should be initialized as well. Okay, so we've got our alien class all set up for us. They tell us what things we need here. I don't know what this total aliens created attribute is. I guess it's a class level attribute, but we'll ignore that. Maybe it's something for later in the exercise. Let's delete the pass there, and we need to start by creating an initializer, which should give us a bunch of stuff. I used a template to create that. I'm gonna ignore the type annotations. I don't really feel like covering that. For some of you might be newer to Python. We don't need to get into all that stuff. So let's just delete that piece right now. And it said it takes the constructor, which is created by using this init hook, takes two parameters, which is the x coordinate and the y coordinate. And we want to use them and assign them. So we attach attributes to an object by using self, which is what that first parameter is that's passed into this method. And then we will add things to it. Python being a dynamic language, you can add whatever attributes you want. So I could call this X, but the problem is the assignment is looking for a specific name, probably because they're doing some testing based off that. So we'll say x coordinate. I got to make sure I spelled that right. And then we assign it that parameter that's passed in. And similarly, we will do y coordinates. So let's do a substitute x with y globally. Okay, and then one more thing that it said, Aziz, welcome. I don't think I've seen your name around before, so thanks for joining in. And if you have been here and I've just forgotten you up, my apologies. We also need the health, and it says that the health starts out at a value of 3. We're just going to put this as a hard-coded value. Somebody might argue that you could put that as a constant, like starting health or something like that. I don't really care. It's an easy thing to update, and this is meant to be instructive for learning classes and not everything else. So that should be good enough. So we have an initializer on the alien, but I don't think that is what we're really after here, or it's part of it. Oh, you've watched videos, but not long ones. Oh, well, in that case, welcome. You're free to ask me anything that's on your mind about Python, Django, or web development, as I left out there in the comments. And I hope you have some good fun here. Let's look at the next thing. So there's no way to test this, which is kind of unfortunate. I guess we could, if we wanted to, bring up a Python REPL and create an alien. I'm not going to do that right now. It doesn't really help us in this process. So let's get on to the next thing. And actually, you know what? Before we do that, I am a little bothered that it looks like, all right, let's try and run this file. So see, it says new aliens collection from classes. And I don't know, did I miss something? Looking for new aliens. All right. Create a list of aliens. So this is a little annoying that they have this as the very last part of the problem. So I'm going to come to this and put in a dummy implementation just so that the test will pass, and then we'll work back to the other part of this. Aziz, let me look at your question here. Your question says, maybe silly one, but where is the best to host a Django project? I assume you mean a Django application. A project is a specific part within the Django vernacular. That is a good question. It depends on what you're trying to do. My immediate reaction was, if you need to get productive fast and you're trying to start a business or do something to that effect, I would still recommend Heroku. Heroku is a really good service that is a very solid choice. It's where I currently deploy my application. And they still do a fantastic job of deploying apps. Now, the challenge with Heroku is these days is that there is no longer a free tier. You can't experiment and play with it and have free apps like you used to. I don't even know if they have a trial period anymore. And this number right here is higher than I would say. I think my monthly bill is like $16 or so. And that is basically a $5 computer, because of the CPU part, along with $10 or so for a database. So I have found that to be a really solid solution for getting my applications going. John, I've not actually used Railway, so let's take a look at that for a moment. There is another one that I will recommend in a moment that I have less experience with it with Django, but I have liked it with other services, and we'll take a peek. But as soon as Heroku announced that they weren't going to be doing their free tier anymore, there were a bunch of competitors that popped up in this space that had a new opportunity. Railway was one that I looked at briefly and decided it wasn't it was kind of a coin toss, really. And I did not go with Railway. We'll get to the one I picked in a moment. But here is another option. John, I'm curious, what did you like, or what do you like about Railway that you can comment on? Is there something that is really sweet about it? It looks nice, but places could have a good marketing page and be a crap product. I'm taking your word, John, that it's not. I'm curious on what your feelings are on it. But a lot of these, Aziz, is like you build your app and you configure it in a slight way that the different services require of you. There's different configuration files that do that. And then you kind of deploy it and they'll build it. Okay, fast setup and pricing. Okay, let's take a peek at the pricing. I'm curious how they run. So they have a trial. Gigabyte of disk, $5 or 500 hours of usage. Okay, that's their free. Oh, that's pretty generous to get going. I don't know how they come up with that $5 number. It's probably amount of traffic, maybe like the data that you're using or the amount of CPU. Although CPU is probably their hours thing. Really don't know how that works, but I'm sure there's some kind of calculator in here. Cool. Well, we won't get too much into that. The other one that was something I've explored is something called Fly, fly.io. And this is, I actually did this with a Lua project. And the way I did that was with a Docker container. So if you're familiar with Docker, that's a good way to go. Although I think Fly has other options for deploying as well that don't require you to know Docker. Here's an example. Actually, you know what? Let me drop this in the chat. You're free to ignore my recommendation here, of course, but it might be something worth exploring. And I'm pretty sure it's free, so why not give it a shot? So they walk you through the setup, and then they have some bit of deployment information, and then they have this Fly CTL, Fly control. I think is what CTL usually stands for in these tools. That can teach you how to launch your application. So Fly launch is the thing that you get afterwards. So my experience with Fly was pretty positive, but again, that was for a Lua app. So this is why I have a harder time recommending this for Django yet. But I've seen other Django educators in the space. I think Will Vincent might be using Fly. Sorry, Will, if you're not. That's what I recollect, but it could be mistaking it for somebody else. So give that a shot. Yeah, I hear you about being worried, being frustrated or concerned that pricing might get too high. Yeah, so if you've got price sensitivity issues because maybe wherever you are in the world or something like that, one of these free to try options might be a good path to go on. Good question, thank you. All right, let's get back to our Python exercise now that we've had that little tangent. So it looks like they need us to be able to have this new aliens collection function, and that's what's stopping this thing from functioning. We need a function, and so let's just create one. Where did my terminal go? There it is. Okay, so, and then it tells us we need one. So create the new aliens collection function below to call your alien with a list of coordinates. So def new aliens collection, which will take, I'm just going to call it aliens for now, which will be our list. And we're not going to make it return anything at the moment, although it should later. Okay, so now I think we're actually ready to run our test in a way that is actually testable. Ah, good, there it is. So we had that stub implementation and suddenly our test passed. Let's see what would happen if we comment out this chunk that I implemented and what would go on. Okay, so here it is. It doesn't even have a valid constructor anymore because it's expecting the two arguments to be passed in as alien. And by default, if you're working with a Python class and you don't define an initializer method like you see here, it's going to assume that there's nothing to initialize it with. So it takes 0 arguments. Okay, so we've got that, and we've got this test. Alien has correct initial coordinates, and alien has health. Like, those things make sense that they pass. And alien has instance variables. So, all right, we've gotten a bunch of these tests to pass. That's good. Let's see, keep going until we hit one. There we go. There's the failure. So this is probably for the next piece of the puzzle. Let's go back to the problem and see what it says now that we have our initial stuff. We're looking at the hit method. That's number 2. So Ellen would like the would like the alien class to have a hit method that decrements the health of an alien object by 1 when called. This way, she can simply call alien.hit instead of having to manually change an alien's health. It is up to you if hit takes health points to or below 0. Okay, so I'm going to leave it in a solution that will just decrement health and not care about the boundaries. So we're going to add our hit method. When you have methods in a Python class, the first argument is always it's going to be the instance, but conventionally it is named self. I could also call this whatever I want. I could call it instance. I could call it foo. It doesn't matter, but it's going to be whatever the object itself is, and the conventional name to use is self. So there's nothing magical about this. I mean, you can see that my syntax highlighting is treating it differently because it's so conventional that tools like to show it differently as this self attribute, but that's what that is. So here, now we can say health, and we need to modify this particular health. So I should be able to use, I believe, does Python have a decrement operator? Nope. And we could do minus equals 1. Couldn't remember if Python had a decrement operator or not. All right, so now we've got our health and the test passes. Hooray. So the principle that they're trying to show here is that with classes, you're supposed to, like, these are sort of the private details of the class in some ways, unless you are intentionally exposing them as API, which maybe you are in some cases, but sometimes you might have attributes where you want them to be private, and the pattern that is recommended if you want to have private state is to prefix it with an underscore, so my private state, and then you put in whatever you want. And when you have that, what you would then do is you would want to interact with that or have outside callers interact with that indirectly through methods that you expose on the class. And the principle being here is a principle about hiding state. And it usually, if you have moved things to an API interface, it means that you can change the internals of your class more freely. So that's something to consider. Although nothing in Python is actually stopping you from accessing this variable, Python developers have a principle of we're all consenting adults, which is not always true. My son is programming; he is not a consenting adult. But the idea being that we should trust each other to make choices that are okay, and if we can agree upon some conventions, then that gives us maximum flexibility and leaves the language open and easier to implement. All right, so that is our hit method. Now we need the isAlive method. So you realize that if the health keeps decreasing, at some point it will probably hit 0 or even less. Yeah, if you call it 4 times, you go to -1. It would be a good idea to add an isAlive method that Ellen can quickly call to check if the alien is, well, alive. IsAlive should return a Boolean. So our version of isAlive, because we're not going to control whether the health is stays above 0 or at 0, is we need to be able to check anything that is a value at 0 or below. That would be the way to define this. So we have isAlive. Again, it takes the self argument because it is a method. And then we want to do a check. And so we need to do a return here because it has to return a Boolean of its state. And we want to look at its health and see if health is less than or equal to 0. Should be the condition when it's alive. Or is that backwards? I think I said that's when it's dead. So it needs to be then greater than 0. That's really what it needs to be. My bad. Okay, so the test passes. Cool. We're ready to move to the next thing. The teleport method. So there is no teleport method. Let's go see what it's supposed to be. The teleport method. In Ellen's game, the aliens have the ability to teleport. You will need to write a teleport method that takes a new x and y coordinate values and changes the alien's coordinates accordingly. All right, so that's going to look very much like this. Frankly, it's almost identical. So we're going to change it from the initializer, and yeah, that's it. It's going to take the two arguments that are there, or as parameters here in the definition, and reset their values to whatever it is. So that should be enough to get this thing to pass. That one is pretty easy. Okay. Collision detection. Okay, let's see. The collision detection method, obviously, that's what's obvious. If the aliens can be hit by something, they need to be able to detect when such a collision has occurred, okay? However, collision detection algorithms can be tricky, and you do not yet know how to implement one. Okay. Ellen has said that she will do it later, but she would still like the collision detection method to appear in the class as a reminder to build out the functionality. It will need to take a variable of some kind, probably another object, but it's really all you need to know, or it's really all you know. You will need to make sure that putting the method definition into the class doesn't cause any errors when called. Okay, so this is an unusual one to me. I don't really understand the value of showing this, but it's showing how to make an empty method, I guess. But we can do this. We can say collision detection is the name that they wanted on it. It has to take self, and the other thing was an other object. We'll use the same name as the parameter. Right now, this is invalid code because there's no body to the method. So the way to give it a body, well, there's many ways, but one of the easiest ways is to call it with pass. Another easy way to do that, you don't have to do it this way. You can also give this a documentation string and say something, I don't know, not implemented. And just by the presence of having a documentation string counts as a method body if you want. So that should now pass, and it does. I don't really like having this kind of message. I mean, I guess it's descriptive. In reality, what I would probably do is raise a not implemented error, which is a type of exception. But they specifically said that they want that to be a safe thing to call. So Python has this way to say, like, hey, you need an implementation here. So this is like if you had a subclass and you wanted to write a collision detection method, then you could do that in the subclass, and that way this superclass version would not get hit. But we're not going to get into subclassing and super and stuff today. So instead, what I'm going to do is just leave this as pass and delete that stuff. Okay. So the test is still passing. All right, let's look at what's next. Ellen has come back with a new request for you. She wants to keep track of how many aliens have been created over the game's lifetime. She says that it's got something to do with the scoring system. So we need a total aliens created attribute that will go on the class and be able to be incremented. And I guess, so where's that going to go? Every time we create an alien, we need to increment that thing. All right, so that's class state. Class state kind of lives at the same level as a method. I will often put them towards the top by the class definition as a way to keep track of that, and then have the methods below. In fact, it sort of lines up with the attributes and methods documentation string here. So we need total aliens created like this. And we want to, because it's class state, we can do this assignment here and give it an initial value of 0. And that'll be for the lifetime of the process. This is the class state. So Python's going to start up. It's going to interpret all of the class and figure out how to put everything together. And it's going to see this class attribute and give it that 0 as the initial value. And then in the init function, we can access the class state from the object instance. So if you use it on self, it will be add to the class. That creates a set of global state for all aliens, which is not great if you're getting into problems related to threads, and there's some state management issues that can happen, but that's kind of outside the scope of what they're trying to cover here. So we got total aliens created, and we'll say plus equal to 1, which will increment our alien count. And now we should be able to do this guy and have it pass. Great. Let's look at the last thing here. That's been a pretty easy, I think actually the last week's challenge was significantly harder than this. Which is funny because it was earlier in the sequence. I guess they're letting us off easy. Or maybe folks who have never done classes before would find this stuff challenging in ways that I've been doing classes for a long time. So this is, yeah, it's not terribly difficult, let me put it that way. Okay, so we have this this list. It's going to come in this format of a list, and it'll be a set of coordinate pairs that will be the X and Y. So I think what we want to do with our new aliens collections, and we'll call this alien coordinates. Let's just spell out the whole word. Why not, Matt? And so we should be able to create a new alien by doing this. So for we'll return, then we're going to do a list comprehension to do all of our creation, and we'll say alien, and then we're going to do tuple unpacking. So that's something we saw last week. So we'll say star of the coordinates for coordinates in alien coordinates. So if this thing is a list of tuples, that means every element in the list will be a tuple pair in that XY format. And then using the star on that tuple, we'll essentially pass those in as individual arguments into the alien constructor. So they will come into here as X and Y and get set with appropriate values. So that should take care of that. And then let's see, did it work? Whoops. Expect total aliens created variable to equal to the number of aliens. What did I do wrong? It is setting it back to 0. What? All right, well, let's come back to that in a minute. Let's see if I got the last one right. I did get the last one right. So I have made a mistake and I forgot to test that last one. So let's get into what happened. So we've got our total aliens created is set to 0. And you can see at the top of this test, they're trying to make sure that that state is tracked properly by setting it to 0. And then they create an alien here. But that's not where it failed. I got that first one. And so mine, total aliens created. These aliens are all in different spots. There should be one alien That's the value, and it passed this assertion. So far, so good. Next, it's calling aliens and it's creating another one. So that should be, that's going to bump that counter to 2, right? That's what I would expect. And then that's going to bump the counter to 3. Maybe because, maybe this is treating it as, well, what did I do wrong? I would expect that this would be class state, or look up to class state. And what it seems to be saying is that oh, hold on. Run that again. So it's failing down here. So I would expect the value to be 3. It's saying the value is 1. So it's reading my value. Oh. All right. I think I might know. Let's try setting it directly on alien. Again, this is, yeah, okay. This is not something that I would recommend doing because there can be problems with dealing with class state like this, and dealing with counters in this kind of global way is kind of yucky. All right, so what really happened? So I guess I wasn't thinking about the consequences of instances. So the instance state was being created, and the instance value was, I guess, starting out with a 0. And so the instance state had its own versions of each of these attributes, or it pulled this immediately from the class definition and started at 0. And so when we added 1 to self, it was only going from 0 to 1. It wasn't in effect creating a global counter. So by changing the reference here from self to refer to the alien class directly, this is now like it's kind of skipping the self lookup of the object and going straight to the class definition. So the self version was kind of creating a variable that was essentially shadowing the class state here. Hopefully that made some sense. Yeah, it's kind of a weird aspect of this, and it's a weird portion of the problem, I think. Okay, so we're done with Ellen's game. That was the whole thing. And hopefully you learned something about classes in that process. Let's take a look at, well, let's submit it and look at some solutions. So we're going to go up and then into that directory, and we say Exercism submit, and the file name, classes.py. And now we should be able to go check it out on the website. All right. So no warnings of any kind. They're happy with our solution. And I'm going to guess that there's not going to be a lot of variability in this solution this time around. The stuff we might see is stuff with people checking whether the health is at a maximum or not. I have a feeling we'll see some people that decided to clip the value so that it could never go below 0. But maybe not. Maybe people took the approach I did and said, doesn't matter. Okay, let's look at 3 community solutions, and then we will move on to some stuff with Django. Let's take Budman's here, and then Zeppum's and Wileyvix. I think we've seen Wileyvix stuff in the past. I don't remember how that person did. I thought it was pretty clever, if I recall correctly. Okay. So they started with their new aliens collection function at the top. It's an interesting aspect of this is that it actually shows that the order of the function and the class and then using it inside the body doesn't matter. So the fact that the body used alien is okay, because the first thing that happens is it parses the whole file and creates a class object for that namespace, and then inside the body it doesn't matter. I'm not a big fan of using map and lambda. This works. Essentially, a map function is a built-in function with Python that can take a collection and then take some kind of function, in this case a lambda function, and then do something to everything in that collection. And then what they did at the end is after that it returns some kind of iterator, so they wrapped it in a list to put that whole thing in a list. So they're essentially creating a bunch of aliens out of that. But to me, this sort of syntax doesn't read very clearly. I mean, I suppose it's fine, but it's not my jam. Okay, so they took out the comments here, but they've got their class state. And then they've got the same implementation. They did add a space between the self attributes and the class attribute, but otherwise it's identical. No, it's not. They've got a third health thing here where they gave that a variable a name. I don't know why they did that, because nothing in the problem needs us to change the health. Maybe they use it somewhere else. Their implementation of hit is the same as ours. Same with is alive. Teleport is the same, although they renamed the variables. And okay, this is something different. They used an explicit return of none. The problem did say that, well, let's see, what did it say? It says you will need to make sure that putting the method definition into a class doesn't cause any errors when called. All right, so what's the difference between what I did and what this person did? When you don't provide a return to a function, which is what the case I have with this pass statement, it will implicitly return none as the return. Both are safe operations because it's the same behavior. It's very, very similar, and down to probably down to the opcodes, it would look very close. So there's nothing to see here. All right, so Budman and I did a very similar solution. Look at Zeppum. All right, same class state, same exact initializer, same hit. There's no need for these extra parentheses around this, so that is extra. I don't know why the person did that. Same teleport, same collision detection, and they did the unpacking a little differently. So they went through and did a list comprehension like I did, but they actually went and unpacked the variables into an individual X and Y so they could call that explicitly. So where did I use the star instead and just treated it as the tuple and did the tuple unpacking at the constructor. But otherwise an extremely similar solution. And let's check out Wileyvik here. This person added type information to their solution. So that's what this :int is here, but otherwise it means the same thing in Python. In Python, type stuff is optional. So it's not a performance penalty or benefit to include this stuff. It's really just descriptive for the reader. That's not 100% true. There are some tools that make use of type information, but generally when it's true. They added a documentation string. I don't find that really adds value for an initializer. I would have left that out. And then again, they did the health equal 3 thing. I wonder if they did that to give a name to the constant value, whereas I just set the value to 3. Otherwise, it's the same function. This person does check so that it doesn't go below 0. I suspected that somebody might do that, and here we go. Here's that example. So it's only going to decrement when there's something to decrement. And the same solution for is alive. and the same solution for teleport. Collision detection used the same strategy of just putting in pass. And they also did this a different way. I'm fascinated that of the solutions, that this function, which seemed like the easiest of one of the easier things to do, we're seeing it now 4 different ways. My way, and then all of the other ones use a different way to do this. So this person is manually unpacking these by position rather than using the star to unpack it like I did. All right, cool. Well, those were all solid solutions. There was very little to critique. I think everybody did a good job there. So let's call this one a victory and submit it and think about the next one. All right. So we are one step closer to learning Python, it says, and we have now completed all of the concepts. And so it's unlocked a bunch of new exercises to do in the future. We can go back to the concepts page and go to the bottom and see that there's checkboxes by all the things. There's no locks on anything anymore. So we're probably going to abandon this page. There's not much use to it. And then switch to a view that uses the exercise page. And that kind of gives us a strategy for what to work on next. So we'll take from this list. And I think every time you do one, it puts the thing at the bottom. We scroll down to the bottom, we can see the ones we already did. They're the ones that are marked as published, starting from Guido's Gorgeous Lasagna, which is the one that my son actually did today. We're starting Exercism programming at home for him, working all the way up through Ellen's Alien game, which is the one we did to complete the set of concepts. So that's Exercism for the evening. Hopefully you learned something from this walkthrough of this Python stuff. It's good to practice the fundamentals, and I think that Exercism still proves to be a good site for doing that. These challenges, as you can see, start out as easy and they have ranks on them. Let's take a peek at a medium one in the future to see, get a sense of like, well, how does this going to go? And so I imagine that there will be a day where we won't be able to complete an individual challenge in a single go. We'll have something a little bit more to do this. So this is a Pascal triangle. We're going to be doing an exercise that builds this with recursion to make this triangle. Okay, that looks cool. So there's some limits. Oh, that'll be some fun stuff. Anyway, that's going to be in the future for Exercism. That's about all we need to dig into today, though. Okay, where are we now? Last time did I end on the MyPy error stuff? I think I did. I was frustrated by MyPy and type checking, with specifically in regard to Django stubs was giving me a bunch of noise in my editor, and so I disabled all that stuff. And so I'm going to that's all gone, and it does clean up a lot of the editor experience. There's a lot fewer things that are there. I still see a bunch of error messages from Pyrite, which is still kind of irritating, but that's okay for now. Let's actually see. Let me get out of here and make sure that I have all of my latest code, which I do. And we're ahead by a couple of commits. So what was the latest? That was removing the Django stubs, and then the thing we did before that was part of this project. So let me orient you to the project if you're this is your first time on the stream. The thing we're doing, this is a homeschool application. It's an app that I build for my family and other families like mine to do scheduling for our homeschool. And there are tasks within the homeschool that are associated with courses, and part of course can have specific resources. Those resources can be books or CDs. Well, do people do CDs anymore? Probably not. Movies and other things that might be used to help aid with teaching. And so the request was, hey, I've got a bunch of tasks that I need to do. Yeah, I think I used Tom Sawyer last week as my example. I need my kids to read Tom Sawyer, and I want to make a bunch of tasks that link to Tom Sawyer so that I don't have to type Tom Sawyer into every single task that I create for my schedule. So Tom Sawyer chapter 1, Tom Sawyer chapter 2, and so on. So the thing we did in the model change that we made was we added a foreign key to the course task, which is the thing that tracks that task state in the system, to a course resource model. And we made it so that it is optional. It is a nullable field, so that there's no requirement to have a course resource connected, but it could be there if we so desire. And where we're at with this is I probably want to deploy that change first. The reason for that is if I don't deploy it and then I start trying to use queries, then what's going to happen with Django is it's going to attempt to make queries that will have that field, and that field won't exist yet in the database, and it's going to have a real sad time. So the first step to do here is do this deploy. And I have, this is where an example, Aziz, I don't know if you're still around, but this is how easy Heroku makes this, is I have a make file, which I can show. And here it is. Here's all I have to do to deploy is do a git push to Heroku main here. Now I might be prompted for some credential stuff, in which case I'll have to hide this for a second. Yep. So I need to, before doing this, I need to do a Heroku login step, and it's going to require me to do two-factor authentication and a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to start this process, and as soon as it prompts me to like input some specifics, I'm going to have to hide the screen here. In fact, I don't actually know what's going to show me. Let me hide for now. I think I can continue to talk, and I need a better secret screen, but this is what I've got for the moment. So I'm hitting, as you're listening to this, I'm hitting Heroku login and hitting enter. And it's opening up my browser, and it's taking me to a page that says login to the Heroku CLI, at which point I provide some credentials, which is good. I didn't really want to have my credentials even shown up here, of even the username, although somebody creative out there can probably find what that username is. So I clicked login once I have the username and password, and from there I have to use my two-factor authentication and punch in a verification code that I have set up with Heroku. So I'm doing that now. One of the one-time password things that will enable me to be logged in. I got a big green checkbox, or a big green check mark after that, and I'm now logged in to Heroku. Let me bring up the scene again. This is what it looks like after I'm done. So this is all boring UI stuff. But if we go back to the terminal on the other side, it can show you that here is some bit there. I'm sure this session is already dead, but I'm going to clear that so you don't have time to copy out around all those characters. And then we're going to try and make deploy again. I don't think there's anything at risk, by the way. That like it's just like there might be a temporary session token. And so it really only applies to those on the stream. If you're happy to watch this on YouTube any later and you're trying to pause it, it shouldn't work for you. Okay, so now we can do this git push Heroku main. And so what happens is Heroku works by having a git repository that matches your code repository. And when you do a push to it, it triggers some hooks that run on the Heroku side. And Heroku has their build process that's built off these hooks. And it works by having something called a stack, and there are build packs for the different phases of your process. If you're running a pure Django application, then you may only have a Python phase, but there are a few things that I'm building with mine. I'm building some JavaScript assets, so I have a Node.js portion of my pipeline. And then I've got a blog that is written in Hugo, a product blog for my product. And so that's there. And then there's the actual Python build pack. And all of these things work in tandem. And ultimately, they build layers and layers and layers. And the thing that they build at the end, what's the term for it? It's called a slug. A very odd term for Heroku, but that it essentially is a build artifact, a little bundle, or a pretty big bundle. It's a couple hundred megabytes. That is the thing that they are going to put in their data center and install your application to run your app. John, let me read your question here. Does Heroku not use SSH for login credentials? That's a good question. I don't actually know, John. So it might be it might be SSH. So if we look back, well, I'm not. Yeah, I think here's what I had to do. So it didn't know how to log in at this point, and so I think maybe if there are SSH credentials, they become invalidated after some amount of time, and that there's some sort of timeout window associated with them. I really, that's a good question. I don't truthfully know. So it very could be that there's some magic happening inside Heroku login that deals with credentials that are SSH related, or in fact does a HTTPS for their stuff. Good question. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer. Ramandeep, let me look at your question now. How to manage migrations in a production environment? That is a big, interesting, and somewhat complicated topic. I'll describe it very briefly for how I do it for Heroku, and then some philosophy around it. And then Harunmei, what is Django? Django is a web framework. It's a tool for building websites. But if you have a more specific question, I can dig into that too. But let's talk a little bit about migrations for a moment while that deployment actually runs in the background. Although it might honestly be done at this point. It goes pretty quickly. Yeah, it's already done. But that's okay. We can talk about migrations and then move on to the other bit. So part of Heroku is to have something called a proc file. And a proc file is essentially a set of instructions of here are the things that I want to run when my app is running. And they define them as a web type of item. And that is what you think it is. It is a server process that can receive HTTP requests and process that and hand it to your Django app and then return a response. And you can see that we're using gUnicorn to do that. But the other bit one other bit that can be exposed by the proc file, at least in Heroku, is this release item that has release colon. And so what this is, and actually I can show it on the build log. There is a release step that happens with Heroku. So it says that right around here that there is a release command declared. And so the new release thing that was just built in the previous steps, which is 153 megabytes, is not ready to actually be deployed yet until whatever release command runs. And you can see what I had there, right? It was the migrate command. So you asked me, how do I manage migrations in production? And the simple answer is I run the migration before or during the deploy process, and it has to finish, and only after it finishes successfully will the thing that I'm trying to deploy that may depend on those database changes actually be installed into the Heroku system. So it keeps you from running code that is dependent on database columns and tables perhaps that don't exist yet. So there's that aspect of it. All right, so there's more to this though. That gets in a bit to the philosophy element of migrations. Migrations are a thing that is hard to get like perfectly right. And so there's a difference between migrations. Let me put it this way. Migrations with downtime versus migrations with no downtime. The latter is a much more expensive proposition, potentially. So it really depends on your application and what the needs are for your app. For mine, this is a little application that is used by a handful of customers. Harome, I'll get to that in a moment. And there are not the same requirements of having a certain always 24/7 uptime. Meanwhile, at a company I work at in my day job, I work for a company called Included Health, which services millions of people all around the United States for providing healthcare. And that basically needs to be always up and running. So for that system, we have a requirement to make sure that our databases never go down and never get blocked, because we need to be running 24/7, because we literally have doctors who are taking calls and providing healthcare for people that need it. So it really depends on what you're going after. For my scenario, because this scenario here, not my work scenario, because I can deal with a little bit of downtime, like it gives me more flexibility into what I'm migrating and how much tolerance I have for a little bit of hiccups, if you will, in the process. Now, I still try to make migrations so that they don't have those problems, because I'm just kind of conditioned to do that from my work life. But things like, let's say you wanted to add a column with a default field. In many databases, that will actually lock the table to populate that field. So if you have a gigantic database table that is adding a new column, then doing that work with a default value will populate the field and lock your database and cause your apps not to be able to respond during that time, because the database is going to be locked during that migration update. That's a scenario that is bad. Bad if you need no downtime migrations. So the way that you have to do that is actually to achieve the no downtime scenario is a multi-step process, where you'd have to first add a column and have it be nullable, so that there is no downtime in the database migration. There's no locking of the table as you add this new column. And then you'd have to do another step that will backfill all of that data with the value that you expect, to populate it with that default value that you would have just put in preferred at the default. And then you have to do a third step to actually then remove that nullability constraint from that new column that you're introduced, assuming that you don't actually want it to be a nullable column. So hopefully that illustrates, at least in a small way, that there is a difference between how much you care about what's your uptime requirements on your site. But the core of it, though, in either scenario, is that I think a good deployment process will try to run the migrations as part of a regular deploy and not as a separate activity, so that you're never stuck with a state where your app doesn't represent the database state. So I hope that answered your question, Ramandeep. Thank you. That was a good one. All right, Haranme. I apologize. I'm not going to be teaching us Java here. I do know Java and have worked with Java, but that's not really the goal of my stream. So apologies if that's what you were looking for, but that's not what I'm after. Hopefully, if you're here though, you can learn some concepts about web development, things that don't apply specifically to Java, but just apply to web development as a general pattern, and that you can get some benefit out of that. All right, so now that we have this database table modification done, and you can see it right here, so it's applied. This migration was the number. So that means that we now have this new nullable column on the database, which means if I choose to start using that column and start to have queries that are running against it, that I'm not going to run into a problem where the column doesn't exist and it throws some kind of operational error, which is what Django would do when you have a query that fails like that. So we're in a position to move on to the next bit. So let's see what we want that bit to be, in fact. Let's take a look. Let's close this little window and look at the process, or look at the issue, excuse me. And I think I outlined this last time, but I forgot. So maybe I should jot this down, the broad steps that we're going to take to do this. So let's edit the issue, put in our little checklist at the bottom. So first thing that we did was we added the foreign key to course task. And we added it was the course resource foreign key. Wow. Come on, Matt. Resource. All right. So that was step one. The next step in this process that I want to take to be able to incrementally add this is to actually focus on, interestingly, the display part. So showing it properly when this record does exist. So we need to display course resource. Oh my word. When a resource is associated with a task. All right. As part of that, we're going to need to think, where all would this happen? Where would this happen? And it might the answer might be in a bunch of places, which means that we should also be considering beware of n+1 query problems, which we can get into what that means. And so check for performance issues. Okay. So after we are displaying it in the right places, which is the chunk that we'll work on tonight, I don't know that we'll finish beyond that. But future streams, what else do we need to do? Then we need to turn around and make sure that we add that functionality to the appropriate places that the user can add it in. So in fact, one of the things that we'll probably need to do here this evening is make sure that the admin can add that. So, but that should be part of the default display for the edit page. So maybe there's nothing to do there, but we'll look at that in a minute. So what should this last thing be? So update task editing forms. And there's actually multiple. So we want the base one, and there's another one that is the bulk. There's a bulk edit one, which will be considerably harder, unfortunately. Update task bulk editing form. So this display course thing can happen in quite a few places, sadly. And same with all these update things. That's the challenge with making this a pretty broad. It seems like a small change, but it's going to like explode out into a bunch of spots, which is why I've been pretty reticent to add it initially. But because it's at the tasks in my app are like the beating heart of the application. Everything is about how do we integrate with tasks, and I have to be careful making sure that I don't really mess up performance badly by putting them in the wrong places. All right, so let's start to look at some of the places where this could be necessary. I think I tried this convert to issue thing in the past and didn't really like it, but I don't remember. So we'll leave this as just a task item for now. And then if it turns out there are a bunch of places that we need to do this, then I'll farm this out to a new task. And then we will enumerate all of the spots where we need to update. John, you say many-to-many join table using resources. I mean, I suppose we could. I'm curious what you think on what your thought is on that, John, because like right now we have it as a one-to-many, where the many side is the tasks and the course resource is the one. So yeah, if you can tell me more if you think that that's going to help with the performance, I'm all ears. Okay, let's dive into it. And actually, it probably makes more sense to let you all see where this is in the application. And let's go. First thing we'll do is we'll look at the admin and see if we can actually see this present in the admin. It should just be there. I think last time I did a local migration, so the local stuff should already have it. So let's open up port 5000. And we're going to go to the office, which is the name that I give the Django admin for my site. And we need to look at the course tasks and click on just one of these. Okay, cool. That's interesting. So this is going to be probably a problem once there's... It's going to be a problem for the admin. It may not be a problem for me now, but if I had a bunch of users, I think this grade selector by default will be all grades anywhere. So I only happen to have 3 grades in my local SQLite database here, which is not why it's not a big deal. But we might need to switch this to a raw ID type. Same story with the resources. That might be. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe there's something smarter happening there. Let me think about that for a minute. So let's look at our course models file where we added this. Oh man, boo! Is this coming from? Where's that coming from? Argument of type literal 30 cannot be assigned to parameter default of type not provided. Oh, forget that. That's so annoying. So there's clearly some stuff here that is still coming from Pyrite that is not happy. And some of it I can't really fix because Django is very dynamic. It makes me want to turn off certain aspects of Pyrite, but I haven't found the control to turn them off appropriately. Or the other way to look at this is like there could be times where these messages are true and valid, and when things are less dynamic than Django. So I wouldn't want to turn them off universally, but also I don't want to add, what was it? I think it was like Pyrite ignore, something like that. I don't want to have these lines sprinkled all over my app. Yeah, it was Pyrite ignore, because that made it shut up. That would just be annoying. So that's the challenge with this setup. And Pyrite is the thing powering my language server stuff that gives me all of the cool superpowers to like go to definition and jump around. So I don't want to turn it off completely. Anyway, enough griping about Pyrite stuff. So last week, here is the thing that we added, this course resource. So it's optional, as you can see, and it's set to null and can be blank. But there's nothing about this that says that it's only going to be for one course resource. So it could be any of them. So that means that on the admin page, so if we go to the course admin and can come down to the course task, I could set this up to be a raw ID field. What's that going to look like? So right now, this is a drop down. What's happening here, this is something to be aware of for Django, because it's a common convenience thing that's provided early. But if you're using the admin for any length of time extensively, and you actually get some good volume of data here, what does this thing do? It will try and pull in every resource that's available. So imagine, so it's going to do a query that gets them all, brings them all into memory, and then stuffs them in that list so you have a name based on the string representation, which is why you can see the name here, instead of just an identifier. That's the string representation of the grade. So if you had 10,000 rows, that thing, this dropdown, would literally have 10,000 items in it and would probably time out on your database. So what can you do about that? There's something in the admin called, what's it called? It's got raw in the name, raw field ID, something like that. Let's go look it up. But I want to show you because it's a useful thing to know. Django admin raw ID fields. That's, I think, what it is. So this is going to be a tuple or iterable of some kind. Raw ID fields. So if you put that in, what it's going to do, instead of being a drop down, it will just switch to an empty box where you would drop in a primary key. So we could say here, we've got list QOPQRS, so we could put this at here, and then say resource, that's the name of the new field that we care about. And it needs to be a tuple, so I can't just wrap it in parentheses, I've got to put that trailing comma. Although I think this could also be a list, so we wouldn't have to do it that way. which hopefully this is, yep, it rebooted because it noticed that the admin file changed. Why did it do it twice? In my local configuration here, I have it set up to run 2 workers. So each worker noticed the change because they're set to do that. And so they both restarted, and then they both have new workers that replace them. So that's why there's all the messages are double, in case you're curious. So if we come back over to this admin and now refresh this page, you can see it switched from being the drop down to being just a field. And we can hit this little search box, which will do a pop-up, and it will give you like a place to go select them. So you still have the option to select, but it's a different step. And then this page by default, I believe, is like paginated. So it's not going to download all 10,000 of them. So it is a way to handle that this problem gracefully. But if you know, like, I think maybe there's probably a lot of historical reasons why this is the default. I imagine it was just a convenience thing at the time. But it is truly convenient. If you don't have a ton of data, like being able to select one of those is pretty nice. And for now, I honestly don't really care. I don't mess with the admin much, and like it's rare that I'm going to want to modify an individual task in the admin. That's not something that I try. I'm not interested in what my users' data is, like how they want to teach their children and the things that they want to teach them. That is none of my business. So I don't do that. So I don't make this page as nice as it could be because it's not a page that I spend any time on. So we will keep it with the multiple drop down because that might actually be more convenient to let us see between one or the other as we're messing with this. So this is course for piano, and we need to add a course resource. Let's say, let's put this on piano, and we'll say piano lesson book. This is the thing that we'll use as the resource. We can go now, and we should be able to go back to the course tasks thing and click on one of these tasks. Come to this resource field and select the piano lesson book. So at this point, this is the first task that is using that optional field. And so the question is, where should that be displayed? Well, we need to think about that. It might actually be kind of annoying. Because we have a description field. And I don't remember if some of the other places I'm using this in the app directly use the description field, or if it just uses the stir method. Because ideally, what I would want to do is say string representation of the task is what I'm after. And so roughly the logic would be something like if self resource ID is not none, that's when it would have a real value. Then we would want to do return a representation that is the string representation of the resource. John, good question. How do I intend to handle multiple resources with each task? I don't plan on supporting that. So if a task may only ever be associated with one particular resource. Like that's the use case that my members are interested in. They again, coming back to that example of Tom Sawyer, is like that's the book they want to assign, and they want to give tasks to that. So it's not like I have a task and it's a math book or it's a math problem, and I want you to have not only your math textbook but your math workbook. Like that's not something that it's not a scenario that, I mean, I could build a plausible scenario to make that happen, but just the user interface required to represent that and what that would mean could be a real nightmare. So I'm not going to go after that. So what we could do, what what I ideally would like to do is say something along the lines of if there's a resource, ID, I'll talk about that in a minute, then I want to represent this, I want the task representation to be the resource followed by, and I think, did I put a colon in the description? I gave the customer some idea. Yeah, I said colon. So colon space and then a self description. Okay. So that might be confusing. And I've confused Pyrite, but this code is not wrong. What is Django doing here? When you add a foreign key, actually let's make this very clear. I'm going to bring up a manage shell plus. Shell plus comes from Django extensions. In case you're trying to run this yourself, it's just a convenience way to not only bring up a management shell, but also import all of your models, which you can see it did there. So I've got my resource available. So I'm going to say that we just created one a little bit ago, that piano library book, right? So let's do course resource. I said library book, piano lesson book. Objects.first. And that's actually not what I want. I want a task. So course task objects.first. We don't really care which one. We just want an example. So now we've got, this is a course task instance that you can see there. And if we do a dir on it, so we can get all the attributes that are attached to that instance. And it looks like trash. It's hard to see through this. It's a list, and then if I pretty print it, it's gonna like be off the screen. Okay, let's just look through here. I'll try and highlight stuff. So here's the relevant bit right here. Resource and resource ID. I didn't define resource ID on my model. So what is that? That's some Django magic happening for you. And the Django magic is this. The resource is a foreign key. And so when you try to access it using self.resource, or in this case, t.resource, what you're saying is, hey Django, if this foreign key is present, go do a query on the database and get the thing that's connected to it. In this case, a resource. So that would have issued a Django-based that would have issued a database query right there. On the other hand, the resource ID is the raw identifier that is actually in the database table for this course task. So it is the thing that would be used in the query. But by doing it, by getting the resource ID here, or checking for the resource ID, what you're doing is saying, I don't want to issue the query. I want to be just checking, is there an ID present at all? And if there is, then I want to use the thing. If not, then don't bother. Or that's what I'm doing in my implementation anyway. Sorry, that was unclear. So that's what's happening here. This check right here saves me a database query. I could write the same thing like this. Let's comment that out. Where I instead do resource like this. And this action would cause that database query that I was just talking about. So this code of resource ID is more efficient than the other. It saves you a database check. Now we're going to do some stuff along the way that should try and do a fetch of that stuff in advance, so that this would actually not be expensive. But I don't want it to be expensive unless it has to be. So this is just a little bit of safety check there. And I guess that's a little bit of the challenge of working with an object relational mapper. That's what the Django, that's a big part of what Django is. It has an ORM, is the short name for it. Let's see, let me type that out in case you've never seen it before. ORM is Object Relational Mapper. And it's the idea of mapping a Python object to a relational database table. That's where the name comes from. But the implication of an ORM sometimes is just knowing the patterns of what it's doing under the hood. And that sadly, only comes with experience in many cases. So this is just knowledge that I have in my head from working with Django for many years. Okay, so what I'm hoping is that many places in the app, you actually use the stir representation in the template rather than calling description directly. I'm afraid that that's not going to be correct though. Because what I want to do, well, let's see if we can see this now. So we've got, let's go back to the app. We know that I've created very quickly an implementation for this stir thing. So this is actually using this if it exists. Whoops, that is with the wrong version though. Resource ID. And does the course resource have, yep, look, the course resource has its own stir method. It's going to use the title, which should be the name that we put in. So it should give us the right format back. So I'm just curious if anything is actually using that appropriately, or if we're going to have to go mess with some tables and make it use a different way to do this. What happens here? Yeah, this is just using the description field itself raw, and that's the course name rather than the task name. Okay, so we don't see it there, but that I didn't expect to. So let's go back to the site and, whoops, wrong place. Return to the app, and let's look for, this was piano lesson 5, which I guess would be next week. Ah, shoot. So this is telling me that it's using the actual description, because if it was just using the task, I think it would have included the other bit. Let's go see if we can find this in a different place. So we might be dealing with this in a bunch of places, which will be kind of annoying. There's the piano. So what I would expect to see is, instead of this, I would expect to see piano lesson book : piano lessons 5. But that's not what we're seeing. Okay, so I think I'm going to have to create a list of places where this can happen. So we've got the task list on the course. Where else does it show up? It probably shows up on some reports. Does it show up on the progress report? Oh, we don't have one yet. It's not going to be on here. That definitely shows up in the resource report. That's not surprising though. Okay, so maybe not so in the report section, but course for sure. And it's also likely going to show up on, okay, let me write these down before I forget them. So I'm going to create and follow this. I don't think I was really happy with this last time, but I'll try to give it another shot. And it's creating a new issue. Open this up. We're going to copy that, edit the description, paste this in, take that part out. So where would this happen? We've established that one spot is the course page as a part of the task list. We're also going to see this on the daily view. These are pages that maybe mean more to me than they do to you, so apologies if you're like, what? I don't know. The daily view, There's also a weekly view. I don't even need to go there. And then there is the task, the individual task view, and I guess also the task edit view. All of those spots. Okay. So that seems good. And let's ditch the parenthetical on the title. That was too much. Sometimes work forms a tree, spreads out. So let's see what we need to modify to make this work. Let's do it. Let's start with the course page, because that seemed pretty harmless. Go see where that is. And it's also going to give us an opportunity. I need to test this string representation thing. And while we're here, we may also want any place there's a list of this stuff is where we're going to need to watch out for performance as well. So the task one is not a problem. Frankly, neither is the yeah. I guess all of them can be optimized by putting in some kind of performance checking. So I was gonna start annotating these with which ones need to pay attention to performance, but we should pay attention to performance all the time. And all of them could be slightly more efficient. All right, so let's go to, where do we want to go? Course views. And we want the list. There's a list page somewhere. I guess that's the course detail view. It's going to have the list. And where's the template for this? I think it's one where we have a conventional name. Yeah, okay. Right, that was the detail view. School year, yeah. This is the course detail view. You can tell by the URL here, where it's just course and then the hash ID, the way to give it a nice simpler identifier. So I've got a table that gets displayed on that course page. So there's not much to see in the actual view file yet. Let's keep that out of the equation. Let's go in the template section and go into courses. And so this should be the course detail. All right, I want to give this a maximum amount of space because there's a lot of stuff going on here. So we've got this section at the top that doesn't really apply. There's a toggle thing here. If task details. And then we're including, okay, I think it's this thing, course tasks. Make sure there's nothing else that's really showing up here. There's the resources section. All right. So course tasks. And I bet there's, yep. So you can see it's going on the task description in order to decide whether to do a line break or not. So I think to make this work properly, anytime we see this dot description stuff, I think we just delete description and let it use the string representation, which is going to be the same thing in most cases, as we saw, like it was using self.description. But when the resource is present, it will give the more complicated version, which is the resource name : and then the description. So how many instances of description are in this file? Just the one? No way. That would be too easy. All right, so let's try that. I'm going to delete those two things. And did it reload with the template change? I've been having less confidence about that lately. I think it should have. Yeah, it did. Hey, look at that. That's cool. That was all there is to it. Okay, but I don't think that's truly all there is to it. Let's test this theory out. So now we need to do the pass that considers the debugging portion of this problem. So I'm going to start this with the debug toolbar on, and we're going to look at the queries for the page because it's going to tell a slightly different story that we've actually introduced a performance bug here, a classic performance bug. I'm going to refresh this, and we've got our stuff on the side. Now we can look over here, and we want to look at this SQL tab, SQL. Somewhere in here is going to be the resource. So we have the one at the top. That's going to be the thing that was part of the view. So this is where if you dig in here and you get all the way down, it's should be in the view code, I believe, because that is on this page. That's what's showing up at the bottom here, piano lesson book. Okay, that's not the only place that resource showed up though. There was another one, and we've got it down here. So I think it's going to be hard to tell from here. Yeah, okay. You can tell, not well, but there's well, I guess okay, you can tell well. Take that back. So you can tell where it did this extra query. This is like a trace of where did the query actually happen. And sadly, I think it is like backwards order from what is useful. This is like the highest level of the whole program for GUnicorn. Like, why did you choose to show me that? Instead, what would have been more useful is the reverse version of this to show it tied, to show what line of code is associated with what query. So what we have to do is we have to scan all the way to the bottom. This is the entire call stack of every function that's been called along the way. And you can start to get hints that it's that the call is happening in the template processing because you start to see a lot of these things, these render content, render content. Like Django does this a lot in the template engine. And it gets very deep and nested, lots of nested render calls. And that's why there's so many of them. But ultimately, you get down to this line it's in a render portion of the template, and it shows you the chunk of template that is affected. So during this call to .task, it went into our implementation that I just added of, this should look familiar, it's that thing was there. And so when it did this self.resource access, just like I said earlier, it didn't have that information. So it needed to go fetch the resource for that one particular task. Okay, so this doesn't seem like a problem yet, but I need to go illustrate to you how it would be a problem, especially if you had a lot of tasks. Let's go see. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up the Office again, and we're going to go back to our course here, or the course tasks, and this time we're going to go to Piano 1, and we're going to add a piano lesson book to this. Okay, so now we've got 2 tasks that have an associated resource. Let's go to our page and refresh and see if I get this right. Now, my prediction, barring weird caching changes and stuff, is that this number is going to go up to 23. And it did. What happened? This table is iterating through each task in the list. So it had the one course and it said, I need to get all of the tasks associated with the course. And I need to render them all. I need to show them to the user. And in the process of rendering, there was a check that said, hey, if you have a resource ID, display the resource. And it did that for here and here. Now, in order to do that, though, it needed to go get the resource. It didn't have, at the time of rendering, it didn't have that resource already associated. So it had to go do a query to the database, pull that down, and get piano lesson book in order to display it here. Similarly, when it got to the fifth item did not have the resource either. So it had to do the same thing. It had to go and get the resource, pull it down, because these two are not connected in any way. So lesson 1 had no idea about lesson 5 also having this connection. And so it had to go get it again and pull it down. Liza Faye, welcome. We're talking about the big reveals coming up about this performance issue. So this kind of problem has a name, a very classic name. It is called the N+1 query problem. So the +1 part here is the course. That was the thing that we had to go, that was the starting point. So, and actually some people even write it as the other way around, 1 + n query problem. I prefer N+1 because it puts the importance on the part that's actually the real problem, which is to say that there could be a linear query. So every time you're looping through, you're asking to go get a resource potentially. So if all of these had an associated piano lesson book attached to them, and we did nothing, then you'd have the one query for the course plus you would do, I guess it would be the one query to get all the list of tasks, but as it's looping through, it's going to do one query, one query, one query, one query, one query for the same resource. And that's the wasteful part. That's the part that can be really inefficient. So a typical course in my app is going to have potentially even hundreds of tasks. So if you have a really long book that you're doing a few pages every day, and those are all tasks that you have in that book, and they're all associated with a course resource. Let's say you have 50 of them. Well, now, amongst the list of your 200 things, you could be looking at 50 extra database queries. And that's just assuming that only one chunk of work had an associated book. It is a totally realistic situation that an English class, a literature class, the whole class might just be books. And if you did that and did this technique of associating a resource, then you're going to be doing many queries on all these resources. Okay, so there's got to be a solution, right? And there is. Django provides some tools that when you know the scenario is happening, you can hint to the ORM to say, go ahead and do an extra fetch of data to this extra table, in this case, the resource table. And in that process, when you do it, associate it with these tasks. And by doing that, you're kind of preceding the list so that by the time this template rendering happens, and it gets to this row and it looks and says, oh, I need to get the resource. Oh, I already have that. So it doesn't have to go out and do an extra fetch on the database table. And it saves a ton of queries. This is a very classic problem, a performance problem in a lot of Django web apps. So we can modify this so that it will go get the right data for us. And thankfully, the fix should not be that complicated. When you have a foreign key, so a one-to-many relationship, you can use something on the object, the ORM, part of the query set. Well, it's part of the manager technically, but the method is called selectRelated. Okay, and selectRelated essentially takes a list of strings for things that you want to prefetch and go actively get in advance. It's actually another version of this that has maybe even a better name. It's called prefetch related. Prefetch related is used in cases where the semantics of when you choose one for the other are a little funky. It kind of has to do with one-to-many versus many-to-many, and how things are merged in Python memory. So you can go like read the details. These things are pretty well documented. I bet if we do a search here, we're gonna jump. We would get right to them. So select related. I don't know why it's taking us the release notes. Okay, database access optimization. They probably describe it in here. Okay. There we go. This is describing the example. Retrieve everything at once if you know you will need it, which is the case we have here. All right, so let's go look. We've got our task list here. And there's probably a couple things we should do. First of all, I should see, are there other places where I'm using the task list? That course tasks HTML fragment. So I'm using it here. And I guess I'm also using it. Where is this? Is this the bulk thing? Okay. This is a bulk delete. Interesting. Interesting. This might get complicated later. Because we've got the get course task context here. Let's go to the definition for that. Ooh, what's going on? Bunch of stuff in here. Yikes, yikes, yikes. Yeah, that's unfortunate. All right, so sadly, this is like I said, this course tasks are at the beating heart of my application, and this might get tricky on how I need to explain some of these bits because there's a lot going on for some of these things. So let's see. Let's first go to the course views and return to that detail view. I guess I'm already there. Course, nope, come on, Matt, you can type. Course detail view. Okay, so here should be the place where we should be able to, for this detail page, integrate this. You can see it's got, I'm using prefetch related. I guess that makes sense for what's going on here. Let's go to the end, and we're going to add course tasks and use the double underscore to say like the thing that inside the course tasks that you want to go filter or want to go fetch. And then we're going to add resource to that list. I think that should do it. And again, black should have run. Why is black not running? This happened last week. I never actually dug in and fixed it. I'm going to ignore that problem for now. Okay, so let's go back to our page and see, in fact, before we do that, I don't want to mess with too many variables at once. So here's our page. We've got 23 queries in here. I would hope that this goes back down to 22 if I did it right. 22. Now, let's confirm by going back to our another one here. Let's put in a third one just to show that what the effect is. So let's add another resource and save it. So now 3 of them have resources associated with them. If we refresh the page, it should still say 22. And it does. Okay. Just to confirm that that's right, let's delete this for a second. And not only, so now that it's deleted, it should move up to 24. 24. Okay, so the introduction of the course resource did add a query. Like before I had this course resource stuff, the query count would have been 21. But by having the need to go get the resource, it brings in this extra stuff. Now, there's probably some fanciness that we could do to really optimize to like get this version. So this is a separate query that happened at the beginning. We saw that when we looked at this thing. There were two. There was one at the top that happened at the view, and then there's one down here when it came up again. And there's probably a way to make that better, but I'm not gonna fret about that part. Okay. Also, n+1 queries. And if you have an app already that has been having performance problems, there's a good chance that this is the problem. If you use the debug toolbar, there's some cool little signals that you can see that can kind of hint at it. And they're going to have this pattern. First of all, in the app, if it's in a loop, you're going to see essentially like a waterfall look. And the waterfall will just, or it'll be like a cascade of all the same kind of query, which you can see right here. And like we said, it only are 3 times. If we had done this with all 5 of them, you would have seen this 5 times. And it would go doot, 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 doot. And the reason that that gets slow is because these have to happen, they happen linearly. So it's like, this is not, it wouldn't be necessarily a problem, although it still would be a problem to some degree, if all of these queries could happen in parallel. But the reason that this becomes a performance problem is it's like, one of my coworkers in the past described it as go fetch me a potato, or potato, something like that. 1 potato, 2 potato kind of thing, where you're doing something in a loop. You're saying, whoop, I'm going to go get the query, and I'm going to wait for the database, I'm going to loop again, and then I'm going to go get, so it's linear. So you're going to get, it's going to maximize the time just because it can't fetch in parallel. So those will be the characteristics. It'll have this waterfall aspect of it, which will kind of curve down and go forward in time. And you're going to see something that says like duplicated X number of times for however bad your n+1 problem is. So it can get pretty bad. This is where you could have potentially like hundreds of queries in your app. It can really run away on you if you don't pay attention to this stuff. So I want to bring that back. So that's for the course task page, or the course detail page. We also have this other example where there was another page that was using this. That's using it directly, and this is an HTMX page. I don't really feel like getting into much of what HTMX is tonight, but it is a way to do dynamic deletion. And when it does the dynamic deletion, it is essentially, well, I can probably show it. So we're on this page, and what will happen, and I don't know that I'll be able to debug history, I think has some capability to work with HTMX. I've not really configured that. But if I click this X right now, and it's going to prompt me. It says, are you sure you want to delete this task? I'm not going to delete it. But if I did hit OK, what's going to happen is HTMX would, this JavaScript library that I have, would like delete the row or issue an AJAX request. And whatever the Django side returns back will be substituted into the place of whatever's here. So I have set up so that it will replace this entire list again. And it is during that rendering that this would get really slow. So we need to make sure that the tasks that are being assembled here also have the necessary prefetching logic, which I think, because this is a foreign key, we can do like this grade level thing here. Let's just confirm that. Let's bring up the course model again and go down to the task. So you can see this is a one-to-many key. There's only one grade level associated with a course task, just like there's only one resource associated with it. So because of that, we don't need to put it in the prefetch related. We can put it up here and say resource. Like that. So it should do the same trick as what we saw. The other view that we were working with was a class-based view where you define your query set up at the top. And so it's got that mode. All right. I bet. Still don't know why black's not working. I'm not going to worry about that. So let's see what kind of changes did we actually make. So we haven't really tested. I don't know that anything is going to test this code. We might have to write a test for this. But we do have the performance test improvements here and here. And then all we had to do is change one template. That's very, very nice. So let's try and run the test suite. And I think this is going to wind us. We're going to wind down after this. I'm going to write the test, and then we'll focus on more parts of the display in the future. But I expect there's going to be a line missing coverage, that one line. Yep. So there's no test for that yet, so we have to make that and prove that it works. And then we can, but I didn't have any failures either, so that's also good news. So let's go to, this is part of the course task model. So let's go to the courses test models page, and there's a stir method here, and we'll do a new test. We'll test stir with resource, and we'll say we'll give it a doc string, which is something I didn't do on these old tests, but I've taken to doing now all the time because my memory isn't what it used to be, and it helps to have these good descriptions. So we'll say a resource title is included in the stir representation. Okay, so we want to do a task. And we want an assert. So that's the same. We're going to run that test. It's the same as the one before. We just copied it basically. And so we need a resource. And so I want to do a resource before. Technically, they should be in the same. The resource should be associated with the same course as the task. But I'm going to enforce that at the form level. There's nothing in the system that says they have to be, so it doesn't really matter if I have a resource that is in the right course or not. We can just, any old resource will do. So we want this course resource factory and just create it with an empty set of parameters. And then we can say resource equal resource here. Now this test should fail because there's a different format. Okay. So what we're really expecting is the format string, which is the resource title with a colon and a space followed by the task description. That's what we changed. So this is asserting the format, saying we care about this stuff. All right, coming back over here. Oops. Let's try to make this again. See how we do. All right, everything passes. Got 100% coverage. We're good to go. We've got our new implementation of stir on the task. We've tested that method. We updated the place that used it on the task page. Now, if I deployed this, this would be harmless, right? Because it's not possible for any user to add a resource to their task yet. So there's no harm. This essentially, what would happen is this if check would always fail, and it would always fall back to this. So I think we're safe to go, safe for this part here. I'm going to commit this and say that it's part of that task, that issue that we're working on. And I think this pre-commit is going to fail because black wasn't working. So it did some nice reformatting there. And let's try committing it. And Joseph, I see your question there. I will get to it in just a moment, I promise. So say incorporate resource into course list page. Resource in task description into course list page. And this is for, what's that issue we just created out of this? 851. 851. I'm going to push that up. And then we will, I'll check off this part. That part's done. Okay. Have I ever written an article about job interviews, Python or Django, on your website? No, I have not. Job interviews, man. I am not a fan of job interviews in the software space. Maybe job interviews are horrible everywhere. I don't know, but I feel like the software job interviews are a particular kind of awful. They test for knowledge that is rarely needed. I mean, I suppose there are some companies that actually do need graph algorithms and all of that sort of algorithmic stuff. I want to call it nonsense, but it's not nonsense, but it's just like not often utilized. Like what you saw tonight here, like this is a real app. Everything about here is real. Did I mention algorithms at any point in this evening? No. So, I don't know that I have a lot of good positive words to say on the interview process. I do, sadly, when I've interviewed, I've gone and done some algorithmic study, just because that seems to be the barrier of entry that many well-respected companies will choose to use. I don't agree with that process, but at the same time, I see why they do it. And I think the reason why is that there are so many people out there that are faking experience with programming. Like they couldn't do FizzBuzz, that kind of stuff. I don't know if you've heard of FizzBuzz, but kind of a classic, a not very complicated programming problem that involves a for loop and a modulo operator that can be solved in about 30 seconds if you have seen the implementation before. It's really not difficult. But there's just so many fakers out there that there has to be a bar that weeds those people that are trying to get these jobs, which they're good, well-paying jobs. So I can understand why people are going after them, but there has to be a filter there. So that's an aspect of job hunting and job interview that I think has to be taken into consideration, especially if you're looking to work for one of these higher tier companies. The other aspects of the interview process is less about the interview and more about, like, if I'm looking at a programmer's stuff, what am I interested in? I'm interested in, what do you have on GitHub? Like, I think let's talk about my profile a minute, not to brag, but just to like highlight some stuff. So I don't expect anybody to have this kind of look on their profile. I don't expect anybody to, have nearly daily activity. To be blunt, like most of this or many of these days, like you see all of these Sundays where it says 1, or most of them where it says 1, because I have a script that literally commits to a repository every night. So the days where it's missed is for the days where my script has broken. So don't read too much into what's here. But if I am looking at your resume, and I look at a lot of resumes because I'm in a position where I need to be part of the interview process, and I evaluate candidates. one of the dimensions that I do consider is there any evidence that you actually are a programmer? It's kind of shocking to me when programmers don't have any kind of GitHub profile. I mean, I used to work for a defense contractor, and so during those years, my profile could have been largely empty, and that I could have been a fantastic programmer just doing everything in an environment where I can't share it publicly with the world because I had to work in a classified laboratory. Knowing myself, though, that's not how I was during those years. I was still doing open source software and experimenting on the side, but I could understand that it's like not everybody is in this place where they work on their code publicly. But it does raise some questions of well, if you don't have anything public, are you interested? Do you have any interest in doing stuff? And it's just one signal among many that I use as a guide to help me figure out people and what they're about. I don't, like I said, I don't count that as a strike against them if they don't do it, but when I'm a little bit more skeptical when I go into that kind of interview of where's your head at? Do you actually care about this profession? Do you enjoy this stuff? Are you proficient? I don't. It raises questions. So I hope that answers your question, Josefe. I know that's not. I wish I could give you an article that said here's my top 10, top 20, or a listicle that is all the things that I care about in an interview. But I just have such a not animosity, not hatred, but I just don't like them. They're just no fun. So my desire to write about them is this big. Okay. So I think that's it for the code stuff this evening. Also, I'm not quite wrapped up, but if you want to leave a comment, subscribe, whatever, all of that good YouTube goodies. I also don't mention this much, but if you go to my website, there is a link to a Discord that I have. So if you want to join up there and ask questions, it's a small Discord. It's not a very noisy Discord either. So if you're worried about too much noise in your life, it's a pretty low volume thing. But I'm happy to chat with people there. I periodically get questions, and there's some good folks in there that'll try and answer stuff as well. So you can check out those resources. I think for the way I'm going to wrap this up this evening is I really want to figure out what the heck's going on with my formatter. I would have expected my tool to fix that. I still don't know why black is working. So if you don't want to watch me get into Vim debugging and what's going on with my code formatter, then thank you for joining in this evening. If you do want to stick around, you're welcome to, but this is going to be me staring at my tools for a little bit and figuring what the heck happened, because it was once working once upon a time. All right, so with that being said, let's look at this. I don't even have black here. Interesting. Where did it go? Is that it? I think I even installed it here and it didn't work. Try and bring it back. I thought I installed it last week. There it is. There's black. Okay, maybe this might be a quick end. This is all I needed, and it just wasn't on my path. Let's go back to where were we? We were at courses views, and let's go to the course detail view again. And I'm gonna just save all that stuff. So what should happen is my editor is supposed to be configured so that when I do a save operation, that's a :W, which I have remapped to a different key for quicker typing. I do leader W, which is my spacebar. Then it should do a format operation, which would call black and then replace this file. But I just saved, and it didn't do anything. Josefe, you're welcome. Thank you for joining in today. So the question is, why didn't black run? Or did it run and fail? It's hard to say. So the tool which runs black is here. You can see that I have a bunch of supported sources here. And there's a log. We can go maybe check the log. Possible. Let's start with the log, which I think was one of the commands. So, and I'll describe what this tool does in a minute. These are from a long time ago. This is not the problem. So the log is not telling me anything. Yeah, I did install. You're right, John. And now I'm 100% confident that it's on the path. Like I can tab, you know, here it is. Black, come on, black version. There it is. Okay. But I think my editor is not configured to use that version of black. So let's describe this editor setup. I have my editor, and we were looking at my Vim configuration last time. And somewhere in here, yep. Buff. That was a format command? Really? That's not something I've even used. Course detail. Okay. Let's have these side by side. So what happens when I run format? Nothing. Boo. That should have invoked something. Okay, so there's multiple ways into this path. So Vim, the language server protocol has a way to invoke formatting. I think it's one of the parts of the protocol. I'm pretty positive on that. LSP format. Here's the Neovim documentation. At the very least, if it's not part of the spec, it's part of Neovim. So LSP, language server protocol, which means it acts as a client to LSP servers. And I'm not going to get too deep into describing LSP, but essentially this LSP should be able to call this format thing. And let's look at this. Format expert is set to Vim format expert, blah, 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 if both format program and format expert are empty. No. This allows to format lines via GQ. Okay, that's not really the case though. Keep going through here. There's help. So Neovim's pretty cool in that it gives a lot of help information, which I can get through my editor, but I'm just showing it to you at the web because I've got this search. So format, one of these, this Vim LSP buff format, it formats a buffer. So that's a Vim terminology for like the current window that we're looking at. Window is probably not the accurate term in Vim lingo, but you get the idea of like the split that we're looking at, that place where it has the code, and formats a buffer using the attached and optionally filtered language server clients. So coming back to my configuration, you can see that I've created this format command that takes the current so this is a user created command, so that's why it was :format, and it will call anytime I call it, it will run on the current buffer. So this is going to run over here because I've got the Python file highlighted, and as soon as I hit enter, I'm pointing like you can see it. I'm sorry, y'all. Look down where it says 149:5, and right above that, very faintly, you will see something say null ls after I hit enter. So I'm going to hit enter in 1, 2, 3, and so it said null ls, and then something about completing formatting. Now, here's the problem. That seemed like it should have done something, but as you can see, this is not formatted. It didn't actually do it. So format is the entry point into running a format operation, and some language servers have the ability to do formatting on their own. Imagine Go Please, Go PLS, which you pronounce it Go Please, is the Golang language server, and Golang has Go FMT built into it for format. So that Go language server can probably run the format operation on its own. Pyrite does not do that. Pyrite is not a formatter, to my knowledge. Instead, I want to use Black as my code formatter. But Black is not a Python language server program, and so it doesn't operate that way. So null ls is a kind of a bridge that allows to take the format request from the Vim client and try to pass it off to a language server. In this case, null ls, the null language server, means it's not a language server for any particular language, but it's meant to kind of act as a shim that you can use. And so in the past, this has worked. And so what I would do is I'd say format, and null ls would run, and it would run on whatever tool that I had, in which case Black had been the tool in the past. And so there's some disconnect happening somewhere where something that was previously working no longer seems to be. Now, I don't think the problem is at the layer of this call to format, as we saw just a moment ago that the call to format hitting enter actually invoked null ls. And so null ls is doing something, but it doesn't seem to be delegating to Black, and I don't know why. So if we look in here for Black, then we get down to here, and it gets us to this line. It says null ls built-ins formatting Black. That seems right. So a couple of things I suppose could have happened here. Maybe something about null ls changed and I upgraded it and I need to go make some changes. Oh, here's where I describe what null ls does. So it could be there's a configuration change that happened and I need to go fix it. It could be that maybe the version of Black that is installed with that null ls has access to is no longer available. If we look at null ls info again, it's saying, well, that's the Lua side, so let's get over here. Null ls info, so it attaches to this and says, okay, I know you're in a Python file, so here's what I'm going to consider as your active tools. We've got isort, which is the import sorter, and Black for formatting. Both of those things should be happening. And that's because I've got them here attached as formatting tools in the sources. So I'm saying, I'm declaring to null ls, hey, please use these tools. So my question is, what happened? What is this doing? Let's go look at the null ls docs, see if anything has changed. It's possible that something has. Null ls. And I could go, how deep does this rabbit hole go? All right, let's go to null ls, built-ins, formatting, and bring up black. Okay. So I suspect what happens here is that null ls is probably trying to farm out, excuse me, I've been talking too long, throat's getting a little coarse. It's probably trying to farm out and execute in a process call, passing in all the information it can get. That's a good question, John. It might not be just be black. You could be right. In fact, let's go test out that theory. I like the idea. Okay, so here we have no files. I think if I do this, I think isort would have also caught this. It would have grouped those together. So I think that's a good call. So there is a problem with any tool that's being used there. Well, I say that, so we have another option. We could check against Lua. There's also Lua format stuff. And let's see. If I do okay, something happened. But I don't know that it was, so I'm not sure if it was the right thing. Because it did this formatting here. Okay. This rabbit hole can go pretty deep. And I think, shoot, my dot files might be red. I think I made some changes. Oh, boogers. I'm gonna have to merge in some changes. So actually, let's assume that was not right. So I'm gonna undo those checkout there. And then, why do I have stuff stashed? Git stash. Drop. Nothing that I cared about. So I'm gonna pull this stuff because I was having a situation where my dot files, my Lua stuff was like thrashing. Like sometimes it would format with Lua format, and sometimes it wouldn't, and it was kind of flopping back and forth between styles. So I locked that down the other night on a different computer, but I hadn't brought that in here. So this is now, I should be able to do pre-commit. Do I even have pre-commit? Nope. Okay. I should really fix this. How far down this rabbit hole do I want to go? I want pre-commit to be like globally available. So let's go here. This is my brew file. We want pre-commit, or I want pre-commit. Brew, pre-commit. And then I'll run my bootstrap command. And this might take a long time, sadly. Because it's been a while since I ran brew, so it's got a bunch of stuff. It might not. We'll see how this goes. I'm gonna let this hang out for a minute. So where can we go with this? We can first see, what would I like to confirm? I'd like to confirm if null ls is allowing Lua format to do the work of editing my Lua file. And if that's working, then it would help narrow down the problem. It would at that point indicate that the problem is not with Python, or the problem is specifically with Python. But if the null ls stuff does not work with the Lua file, then to me it would indicate that the problem is with null ls as a package, rather than being a Python specific problem. I'm trying to decide how long I want to let this hang. So, because sometimes it will resolve. I wish brew authors, if you're listening, I'm guessing you're not, can you put some kind of spinner here? Let me know you're actually working. That'd be great. The halting problem personified. Because I think if I kill this call right now, it will actually just go and like run up. Right? I was just about to kill it. It's like it knew it was coming. All right. So I'm running my brew thing that's upgrading all my tools, and it should add pre-commit to this. From there, I can do pre-commit install so that I can have my Lua stuff protected if I try and commit any changes here, because I don't want that. Yeah. And if there's more thrashing with my Lua files, I'd be able to see it. Because I don't understand why my setup was thrashing. It could be, you know what it probably is? I bet I installed Lua format somewhere globally on my other server or my other machine, and this one I did not. So Lua format's not available, so it just skips it, and that's where the pre-commit stuff will save the day. But sadly, doing this is like upgrading the whole world. It's like doing it right, but it just means it's slower. We'll update this stuff, then we'll move on to testing out the null ls thing and hopefully fixing it. I am out of water, so I will be right back. We'll stare at this for a moment, and it will proceed. So I don't think I've ever stepped out before, but I promise I'll be back in a minute. Oh, wow. Still sitting there at node. Really? Forget that. Okay. Not doing that. I've added it to my brew file. I'll get that later. Let's just manually install it for now. Brew, install, recommit. In other scenarios in the past, I've actually added pre-commit as a tool to my project. So I would do that, for instance, with my homeschool app, just have it be a portion of my virtual environment. But for my dot files, it's Lua and stuff. So it doesn't really make sense to do that. Like it's kind of, I've reached a point where it's like, this just needs to be globally installed. So pre-commit install. Now my stuff is ready to go. Okay. So we're back at this point where, in fact, I'll open it up over here. So where do I want to go? I want to go to Neovim init. Oops, already opened over there. Close that. Abort. Try again. Okay. Let's look for black down here. And I've got it multi-line. Now I'm going to watch after I save what actually, is it null ls or is it some Nico? Null ls. Is that what, no, is that what actually did this for me? So something moved the string. Was it? Seemed like it was null ls. Okay. And then for a sanity check here, let's try adding these. See if pre-commit's going to run. So it's installing its own Lua formatter. Oh, snot. Okay. Oh, sigh. Fine. Brew install Lua rocks. Man, it's like that. This goes so deep. Okay. Lua rocks is necessary in order to get packages for the Lua ecosystem. So I can't just have Lua. I gotta have both. Which means I probably also want to add Lua rocks to my brew file. Do that here. Let's say Lua rocks needed for pre-commit. Brew Lua rocks. Try that again. Now, sadly, I think that on top of this, Lua rocks or Lua formatter is a thing that compiles. So it's possible that this may not even work on an M1. I don't know if Lua formatter has been updated to support M1. We're going to find out. Deep rabbit hole. But I'm sort of feeling like, oops, that was the wrong area. It seems to me that null ls is just not working with my Python stuff. But why could that be? I'm wondering now if my version of Python is part of the problem. I'm gonna let that run in the background. So here's my thought, is a while ago, I was on Python 3.10. Python 3.10. And now I'm on Python 3.11. So the question is, maybe what happened is Mason installed with Python 3.10 and something about the path is getting messed up when I'm trying to run, and it's not allowing black to run. That's a possibility. In fact, let's test that theory. Oops. Oh, I'm over in the, no wonder, typing in the chat. Let's get out of here. And let's switch back to, oh, I deleted the virtual environment. Killing me. Can I just deactivate? Nope. 3.11's default. Boogers. Okay, fine. Python 3.10. Still have it. M venv and then venv 3.10. And then I want to activate venv 3.10 bin activate. Now we're on a 3.10 specific version. Now let's go over here and go to course views, right? And try and save here. Nope. Okay. Well, shoot. It was a good theory. How do I debug this? This is like deep in the editor. In a plugin. There's no logs. And I don't even think it's, I think it's like unique to this computer. I think this works on some of my other machines. That's pretty annoying. All right. Oh, boo. Why are you now reformatting everything again? What's the deal? So is this Lua format and the other one didn't? This is the kind of thrashing that I'm like, what is going on? So clearly, something when I saved here tried to do a bunch of extra formatting, almost like it wasn't respecting my config file. Because when I just, so Lua format just ran, and I had all those changes that came about because of it. And then when I added those to the stage, now we're down to a smaller number, a smaller delta. Still like deleted some lines, which I find annoying, but whatever, I'll deal with that. Maybe that's a one-time deletion. But if I go back into here and go into that init file, I just hit, all I'm gonna do is hit save. Okay. All that stuff changed. What just ran that? Is it not Lua format that just ran? Not cool. Not cool. Lua format. Style Lua. Oh, what is that? Support. Oh, those are supported sources versus only active sources. Because I only have in the section here, I'm only using Lua format, so it'll show me using one. So one of two things is happening. Either it's ignoring my Lua format config file, or there is some other formatting tool that is also happening run, maybe some Nico, because the LSP is a different tool. Which is the Somnico Lua. You can see it there. But I'm not sure. So how do I spell that? Sumnico. Lua formatting. Is it doing formatting? It does. Okay. Maybe that's what's doing the formatting. Now the server allows you to format the code without using other programs. But where is it getting its formatting style from? Yeah, that's a good point, John. All right, let's leave that up. And it would help narrow down. Emmy Lua code style. That would kind of indicate where this is coming from. Format Lua code and check Lua code. So I might have to, man, what a rabbit hole. Like I'm trying to just confirm if Python did it, but it's like way deep down in here. Okay, so now what? Where is my, here, let's have two tabs here so I don't have to constantly be closing this thing. So that's the just save version, right? So let's do GCO dot, still got the staged stuff. I should be able to mimic this again by just saving. And yeah, it clearly did some stuff there. So who did it? Who done it? Let's comment that out again. And okay, I'm gonna comment out this whole line. Some more stuff changed. I'm gonna try and commit this. It's gonna fail. What? No, stop. Okay. Okay, so the Lua formatter so this is the commented out version. I don't want to commit that yet. Now, to your point, John, let's see. Now the proof's going to be in the pudding. Nope. Let's open this up again. If I save, let's let Sumnico finish over here. See if it's Sumnico that's doing formatting, or if it's null fs. Save. That's got to be Sumnico, because null ls did not seem to run there. Oh, come on. So how do I disable that? Because I want to. Because I picked a style a long time ago, and I don't really want to take some random style. Figure that out. Disable Sumnico Lua formatting. Disable formatting for Sumnico. So there's a formatting block here. Advanced setup. This is some like other system though. Controlling formatting. Okay. This might be specific to this Astro Envim thing, which is probably like, what is this thing? Layer on top. Yeah, somebody else's like super tricked out custom thing. All right, let's look for Sunico's configuration section. There is stuff here. The Sunico project's pretty good, so they probably have described what the option is. Or maybe it's in this pull request. Code format. Formatting. Range. Blah, blah, blah. Code style check. Is that the name of the field? No. Not the name of the field, I don't think. Ah. Capability. Is this it? I'm looking for options that I recognize. Get an iter. Check third party. That was one that comes up. Check. Oh. So, where is it? Test. Okay. It's not obvious where it needs to be, which means it might not be something that I can toggle. All right. Okay. Oh, I'm looking at a different project and put under its own umbrella. Maybe. So Nico's the author. If I remember correctly, this project defines its configuration. View the configuration file. Here are the settings. No, but I want to know what the actual settings are, y'all. The available settings. Okay. Look for format. Settings for configuring the built-in code formatter. Format.enable. Whether the built-in formatter should be enabled or not. Okay. So I think it just goes in here somewhere, like a format section. Before I do that, let's look for check third party workspace. Yeah, okay. So that's the path. So we want format equal enabled equal false. And then close that off. Okay. Now, oh my word, finally, I might actually be able to stop this soon. I'm going to quit out of here. Let that format. check what's actually there. So we get that one line, and it's still disabled. So now we should be able to go back into Neovim, go to the init file, and with any luck, nothing should be formatting right now, right? So there's no changes left. I'm gonna hit save. Save. Oh, you jerks. Something formatted. That's so disappointing. Format. Wow. What ran that thing? I mean, surely I got that right, didn't I? Because I looked at the format for this section. Seems to be workspace. These seem to map to like top level things. They all go in this Lua section. So the Sumnico settings setup should be whatever variables we need. Is it enable? It's enable. A typo. It's getting too late. I'm making dumb mistakes. Let's let the formatting go. Let's add that. So now there are very minimal changes in here. And the null formatter is commented out. So now, nvim, be able to go into this init file, save, and nothing should happen. Nothing happened. Okay, good. Finally feel good about where this is. So now, let's enable the null ls formatter for Lua format. So that's enabled. All we did was add that, so let's do that. And let's quit out of here, because I don't know if it needs to be at the initialization time. So the init file, look at the null ls info, and we have Lua format. But it might, I don't know if it depends on Lua format being available. Is Lua format available? No. It might not do anything. Let's go back to black. And I don't know. What would it change? Like this? Because the Sumnico was like lining it up, and then I think Lua format was putting it immediately one space after. So this should piss both of them off. All right, so nothing changed, even though the Lua format was on. And if I add this and try and commit it, it's going to fail because, yeah. So it should have gone back, which tells me that Lua format's not there. So let's look at Mason. And we want to look at formatters. Does Lua format might not even be in the list? Oh, jeez. Dang it, dang it, dang it. Okay, so we have to, oh, there it is. Okay. Install. This is installing from Lua Rocks. We're going to find out if this is going to work or not. I'll be back in just a minute while it's building. Okay. Sorry, had to step away for a minute to stretch my legs. It's been a long time. So we have Lua formatter apparently now. Is it applied right away? Doesn't seem to be. Let's close this out. Try and open this up again. Run init. Go down to the section where we're working on. Run save. There it goes. Okay. Hooray. So what have I convinced myself of? Null ls does work. It works. We disabled the Sumnico one, and we saw once we got the formatter going that it works with Lua. So something else is going on. Don't have time to dig into what that problem is with Python, but I'm confident that it is not a particular problem with null ls. We're gonna have to dig in more. I do suspect it's something related. I bet there's probably something about cache in Mason. And if we clear it out and reinstall stuff, it might work, but I don't really know. So I'm not gonna mess with that anymore. Thank you all for joining in super late. John, thanks. Appreciate your comments there. That was super helpful. And I'm very grateful for your contributions on the stream. And I'm going to end it there. I don't know that I've ever gone for nearly 3 hours, but I did. So hopefully y'all learned something this evening, and I will see you next time. Take care.